Good morning and welcome to the annual Boys Latin Veterans Day celebration. BL has presented this type of ceremony for approximately 35 years. I don't know any other institution that does that. At this time, I would like to recognize any military personnel in our audience. This year, we're going to do something a little bit different than we've ever done, and I think we're going to do it forever. With the aid of the middle and upper school concert bands, we're going to play the hymns of every branch of service in the U.S. military. They will play a specific song for every branch. So if anybody in the audience is currently serving, has served, or students, faculty, if you have a relative who has served or is currently serving, we want you to stand when I announce the branch. So if your grandfather served in the U.S. Army in World War II, and I say Army, they'll play that, that's when you stand. I think this is a nice way of doing this. You ready, Mr. Pisarcik? First hymn is the United States Coast Guard. United States Air Force. United States Marine Corps. United States Army. United States Navy. Great job, guys. Mr. Pisarcik, how long have they been working on this? 2 or 3 weeks. Amazing. Veterans Day was originally known as Armistice Day and celebrated the conclusion of hostilities for World War I. This took place on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. It was renamed Veterans Day in 1954 to honor all who have served from every time period. Here at Boys Latin, we honor all of our past military personnel and those who are currently serving. Even though this is not Memorial Day, we pay special attention to the 25 BL graduates who lost their lives in the service of their country. This morning, I'm going to honor two of our fallen heroes. The first one is Robert DeShiel Ebert, class of 1947. Robert entered BL in 1941. He played 3 varsity sports: football, basketball, and lacrosse. He was also the editor of the Inkwell for 2 years and co-editor of the yearbook. He was affectionately known as Foggy. I'm not quite sure, I've heard some references. I think this was because he had a lot of blank stares a lot of times, and that was usually followed by some subtle joke. He was well liked by everyone. After graduating from Boys Latin, he entered Western Maryland College, which is now McDaniel College, and entered into the Army ROTC program. Upon graduation, he was commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Army. And during the Korean War, he served in the 23rd Infantry Regiment of the 2nd Infantry Division and was wounded in early July. He came right back to combat, and unfortunately, he was wounded again on July 25th and died of his wounds. He is buried in He's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Our second alum I'd like to mention is Benjamin H. Woodruff Jr., class of 1944. Benjamin is really an anomaly. He transferred from Poly in 1944, actually in February of 1944, and graduated from BL in June of that year. There are no records in our archives or anywhere I can find about his time here at Boys Latin except his report cards. A 1945 graduate, however, stated that he was really a nice guy and well-liked. The years from 1945 to 1952 remain a mystery. I'm pretty good at uncovering people's military history, and I couldn't find anything for those years. I'm just not sure what he did, where he went, where he received his training. But he's the type of guy we can't forget. When I looked up these names, I usually try to get a lot of information, but there was hardly anything, and I thought, well, that's no reason not to mention him. During the Korean War, he served as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force. He was part of a crew of a C-47 aircraft attached to the 21st Troop Carrier Squadron. On April 29, 1952, his plane was transporting wounded American soldiers from the front near the North Korean border. For some unknown reason, his plane crashed in the sea off the coast of North Korea, killing him and all on board. He is also buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Now we're going to turn our attention to the present. Today, I am honored to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Commander Matt Most. This is special for me because I taught Matt and coached him a little bit on the baseball field. Matt graduated from Boys Latin in 1985. He was a member of the National Honor Society, Student Council, and the Honor Board. I remember him most as a second baseman, patrolling the right side of the infield, which he did a really good job of. When I first contacted him, we lost contact for years and years. I think it was last spring. I emailed him and I said, if I remember right, you were a second baseman. And that's how I remember him. After graduating from Boys Latin, he attended the University of Notre Dame, where he graduated in 1979 and was commissioned an ensign in the U.S. Navy. He went on to naval aviation training and received his wings in 1991. During his 25-year naval career, he logged over 3,500 hours flying helicopters, conducting anti-submarine warfare, combat search and rescue, and naval special warfare support missions. He served an active role in Operation Desert Storm, Bosnia, Haiti, Operation Enduring Freedom. He also served as an instructor, engineer, and advisor for numerous schools and commands. From 2007 to 2008, He commanded the Helicopter Sea Combat School, and from 2009 to 2011, he was an Air Department head for an amphibious carrier at the USS Macon Island. Now I'm going to say this, some, not all, because I couldn't list them all, some of his commendations include the Meritorious Service Medal, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, Joint Service Achievement Medal, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, Meritorious Unit Commendation Medal, Defense Service Medal, Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, and there's too many to keep listing. Matt has obviously retired from the Navy, and he and his family, his wife Linda, live in Texas with their 2 children. And it's my pleasure to introduce Matt Most.
Unfortunately, the challenges of getting older and flying too many night vision goggle pops. So, good morning, BL. It's good to be back. Laker students, you guys are looking great. Really appreciate you all inviting me here. Special thanks to the band. That was a great rendition, and for 2 to 3 weeks of rehearsal, that's amazing. So my hat's off to you. It's my distinct honor and privilege to be back on campus to talk to you after graduating almost 40 years ago. I remember my first day coming in here. I think it was Coach Shriver was my science teacher in middle school, and he walked in and I thought, what did I get into? Because he walks in and goes, okay, squirrels, take your seats. And that began my time here. It was a great time. I enjoyed every moment I was here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that down the road. But thank you, Coach. Appreciate you reaching out to me and giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts on this Remembrance of Veterans Day. The fact that we're having this assembly is a credit to this school and honors all our men and women who have served this great nation, not just BL. I can tell you that people across the United States would be proud that a school like this is out there honoring our veterans. I spent quite some time thinking about what to say today, most of it while driving on some very long, lonely stretches of road between my home in Texas and El Paso. So I had a lot of time to think. And I have to admit, it opened a floodgate of recollections regarding my time in the Navy serving our great country. Hopefully, I can share a few thoughts regarding what I consider most important. And although I've been blessed with a very long military career, I want to talk today about the people that I want us to think about and recognize. Okay? These are the people, from their sacrifice and dedication to duty, the men and women who've not made the military a career like myself, but they answered the call to duty and following their service in the military, they returned to civilian life. The United States is blessed with incredible people throughout each generation that are willing to dedicate themselves to service, whether it's in peacetime or conflict. These veterans, without fail, volunteer to serve in the various branches of the military for a variety of reasons, but they are all ultimately having one thing in common. They wish to protect this way of life we call the American experience. I want to start off by stealing a quote by Sir Isaac Newton, which normally references intellectual achievements, but I think it fits well with what I'm about to discuss. And Newton said, "If I see further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." Veterans of today can look back and see that we embrace an ethos that can be traced to the generations of veterans that preceded us all the way back to the militias of the Revolutionary War. In the past 100 years, our veterans have defended this nation in 2 world wars. My grandfather slogged through the jungles of various forgotten islands in the Solomons and New Guinea in World War II. One of my cousins flew gliders into Normandy, while another defended a thinly held line in the Ardennes forest and was captured by Germans during that same war. In Korea, my uncle Robert Kaiser, who's with us today, another Second ID alum, pushed up the Korean peninsula after landing at Incheon with MacArthur to regain occupied land in coalition with our South Korean allies. When all hope seemed lost, we came to the aid of our allies and helped them to establish what today is a thriving democracy over on the peninsula. They did this without what we would consider modern weaponry and in a chaotic, deadly environment, marking their progress, measured oftentimes only in yards. They fought the elements and oftentimes a more experienced enemy, while under-provisioned and lacking the basic necessities that they needed to even survive. You may be asking yourself, so what? We've been fighting wars since the dawn of mankind. You are all students of ancient history here, I know because I took your courses. You understand Marcus Aurelius, you understand all of the works, you understand warfare, and you understand ancient warfare. It's as old as man. But what I would like to say is the difference that always resonated with me is that this generation of heroes that we have today, without reservation, left their jobs and secure lifestyle, willingly went to these distant lands to defend and preserve our way of life and all the freedoms that we enjoy. When their job was done, sometimes years later, they came home, quietly returning to and rebuilding their lives that they'd put on hold for a bigger cause. They are the foundation that our military is built upon. And although generals and admirals are praised in the history books, it was these volunteers that showed up when their country needed them the most and in some of our darkest hours, and they made a difference. That legacy lives on today with an all-volunteer force that protects our country and its way of life. People like my brother, who joined the Army directly out of high school at Poly and served during the end of the Cold War, and the many BL alumni who have answered the call to serve this nation's military, with some making the ultimate sacrifice. Our veterans today still demonstrate that same commitment to the American ideal and experience, and I feel that it is distinctive when I see other countries' militaries working and compare them, which you often do, to your own military. I see our folks train hard and fight harder. They joke and see humor even when the odds are stacked against them. In the infamous words of Chesty Puller, "Gentlemen, we have the enemy in front of us, in back of us, and on both sides. We got them right where we want them." Okay? I believe history will show a lot of these traits as uniquely American traits. Our folks come from small towns and big cities. Some of the folks I've gotten to work with came from places like Durango, Colorado, of course, San Diego, California, Detroit, Michigan, Las Cruces, New Mexico, LaPorte, Indiana, Pass Christian, Mississippi, Fargo, North Dakota, and yes, even a few from Baltimore I got to work with. Despite being from various regions, communities, economic circumstances, they all find a way to work with one another to get the job done. I've seen these young men and women launch and recover hundreds of aircraft night sorties in a single period on the deck of the carrier, working together, each skilled in their own unique way, working on a dangerous flight deck, deafening loud conditions, worst weather conditions you could ever see, lashing rain, snow, and sleet coming down on the deck. I've seen them perform complex operations that span land, air, sea, and space all at the same time, simultaneously. They train hard, they're objective-driven, and understand teamwork. They labor through incredibly long days, sometimes 24 or 48 hours at a time, and all they can catch is a short 5-minute, 10-minute nap. Their dedication and sense of purpose to succeed overrides all, and they do it for a relatively low paycheck. They are manning the guard and keeping watch today in Europe, Africa, Asia, and across the world's seas so that we can sleep soundly at night. Our veterans of recent times have had to adapt to a new world where almost every decision and action that they take is transmitted through a public media, traditional, internet, and social. Today we live in a connected world where a young platoon sergeant may have to make a tactical decision that has strategic or even global implications for the United States. Remember, these young men and women are only a few years older than seniors out there. The amount of responsibility that we levy upon our young service members and the confused environments which they have to make instant and critical choices have earned them my deepest respect. Many of these young men and women have come back from combat service in places named Fallujah, Al Anbar, Wanat, Pesh Valley, Korengal, Takur Ghor, and countless others that are never known until they make a news headline. They return with physical and psychological scars just as generations before them have, but they move on and resume their lives in society as productive citizens. And what they bring back is the same motivation and sense of purpose that made them successful in the uniform. They live by mottos: honor, courage, commitment, semper fidelis, this will defend. Like a guide on in a parade formation, these provide a compass for their every action. Many of these young men and women that serve our nation come from some of the toughest environments: rural America, impoverished neighborhoods riddled with gang violence, Rust Belt communities in the Midwest. Their reasons are different for joining, as I said earlier, but our service members quickly learn to pull together and watch each other's backs, all the while embracing those core values and working as a cohesive unit. I have many personal experiences with leading these folks, but I guess I'll talk about one of the biggest ones, is that we would go out at night and my teams never faltered when we got out there in dangerous conditions. We always knew what we needed to do. They were always able to go ahead and pull their weight on their side, and that's what I appreciate the most, because many times we were probably within inches of touching the face of God. I would be remiss if I also didn't mention the families that support our military men and women. Spouses single-handedly raise the children and keep the household running while deployments continue to drag on and months continue to get added as one world crisis blends into the next. Children take care of their fellow siblings, and neighbors on bases band together to ensure that nobody feels isolated or is forced to deal with hardships alone. The military family is as integral to the success of this nation as the person serving, and this continues in the transition to being a veteran. This nation is, in my opinion, the finest in honoring its veterans. When they're injured, care is provided. When they transition to civilian life, education and training are readily available and encouraged. We are truly blessed. I know that every day when I wake up. Some folks have asked me, what can I do to honor our veterans more? When I was younger, I didn't know the answer to that question, but as I reflected on my experiences, I would say this. First, understand and be knowledgeable of why they are serving. Each member of the military takes an oath to the long-standing ideals of the United States. Specifically, I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. This is unique because we do not take an oath to a king, an office, or a ruling class. This oath is sworn to a concept, an ideal that was initially inked shortly after the founding of this country. It has been amended through the years, but I think our founding fathers got it right. Learn and understand what the Constitution provides you citizens, what the government's role is, and how we preserve it. This is a great nation. To not understand how it functions is to waste your freedom and all the benefits it grants you. Second, you have a great advantage of being in the BL family. Your teachers care incredibly about you, and they put a lot of effort into you. Quick C story, when I went into high school in the upper school side of the house, I had a calculus teacher named Mr. Girardi. Sat down with him. He used to be, I believe it was a soup over at Baltimore Poly. And sat down with him one day and I asked him, and this man was very mild, a very mild gentleman. I mean, gentleman is the best word I can use to describe him. And as I talked with him, I found out that he was a naval aviator. He flew, I believe it was F-4s, around the same time, World War II to Korea time frame on it. And he was an aviator. That was one of the major things that drove me into where I wound up going when I joined the Navy. But back to the point. Your teachers care about you, they educate you. Use that education as a gift to help others less fortunate than yourselves make their lives better. When you're leaders in the world, embrace service in some way. It doesn't have to be the military. There are many ways to serve. But always remember, the benefits you enjoy today and the future responsibilities, and in the future, you should include the responsibilities to defend and bring a better life to the others tomorrow. It's a big responsibility, but I'm certain that each of you is up to the task. I believe that is the best way you can honor our veterans today. So, before I leave, I'm going to leave you with some quick words from Chief Tecumseh, whose statue stands at the U.S. Naval Academy, man wise beyond his years. This is considered kind of the informal warrior's creed. So live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one about their religion, respect others in their view, and demand that they respect yours. Love your life, perfect your life, beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and its purpose in the service of your people. Always give a word or a sign of salute when meeting or passing a friend, even a stranger when in lonely places. Show respect to all people and grovel to none. When you arise in the morning, give thanks for the food and for the joy of living. If you see no reason for giving thanks, the fault lies only in yourself. Abuse no one and no thing, for abuse turns the wise ones to fools and robs the spirit of its vision. Thank you again today for letting me speak, and go Lakers.
I wanted to get a gift for Matt for his participation today, and I figure a coffee mug, he probably has 100 of them. So I have something I know he's really going to like. Baseball guy. At this time, I'd like to introduce Headmaster Post for his closing remarks. Mr. Post?
Good morning, fellas. Please join me in thanking Mr. Maisel for his efforts with today's assembly. Today's gathering is always a special occasion for our school and community, and we appreciate all that you do, Mr. Maisel, to honor and keep alive the service and sacrifice of generations of service personnel. Fellas, what I'll say to you today should sound very familiar. I have, for my 16 years as your headmaster, tried to remind us of the deep and personal connection that we all have to Veterans Day. The service and sacrifice provided by women and men all over the world is a tangible example of what it means to embody our motto, esse quam modere, to be rather than to seem. The service and sacrifice provided by women and men all over the world is a tangible example of what it means to live out our values of courage, compassion, and integrity. And I stand before you again today deeply saddened that across Baltimore so many schools will allow this solemn remembrance of service and sacrifice to pass without mention. Classes will come and classes will go. School will begin and school will end. And for peers of yours elsewhere and their teachers, there will be little to no recognition of Veterans Day. So I stand before you today instead to ensure that each of you and all of us never allow the example of our veterans to fade from our memories. I've shared this with you before. One of my earliest memories of Veterans Day was in my own schooling. I was in 7th grade when we dedicated the Alumni Memorial Flagpole at my alma mater. A handful of the last alumni veterans of World War I gathered with us, with all of us from school, on a cold and raw, quintessential New England fall day, a lot like today, to acknowledge and honor their fallen comrades. These alumni gathered and they had red poppies on the lapels of their jackets, symbolizing the poppies in Flanders Field that marked the many lost after World War I. My own headmaster, Mr. Richard Bradley, had volunteered with the British Royal Marines in World War II, and he reflected on the call to serve, to be willing to sacrifice without counting the cost. I've shared with you before that one of the most important mentors in my life, Mark Kelly, my first advisor, English teacher, and football coach, he saw in me possibilities that I couldn't yet see for myself. And every year, he'd tell us how his grandfather was a veteran of World War I and his father was a veteran of World War II. He'd wear his father's dog tags and his grandfather's pocket watch in their honor. Today, we acknowledge and thank veterans among us like Mr. Earhart, Mr. Ryan, Mr. Reese, and Mr. Kaltrider, many faculty and staff who've preceded them, and the many who will follow someday for their service and their sacrifice. Today, we acknowledge and thank the many families who've stood by in solidarity and support of their loved ones who've missed birthdays and holidays, significant moments in their own families' lives, so that we, as Commander Most said, may enjoy those very things safe in the freedom of our own gathering. So, in fact, if you have a member of your family who's actively serving, please stand. If you have a member of your family that has served previously, please stand. Fellas, take a look around. Please be seated. We acknowledge and thank good people like Mr. Kennedy's classmate, Dr. Wendell Jones of the class of 1976, and my own mother, who've dedicated their lives as physicians in the Veterans Administration, serving, caring, and fighting for the rights of generations of women and men who've so valiantly been willing to sacrifice on behalf of our nation. We acknowledge and honor the legions of our own alumni who've answered the call to serve. Many sat where you boys do today. They sat here and they've heard Mr. Maisel and others speak of courage, of compassion, and of integrity. Our alumni, like Commander Most, have chosen to lead lives of service reflecting our values and embodying our motto, esse quam videri, to be rather than to seem. Commander Most, it's a privilege and honor to have you with us, and again, welcome home. Join me in thanking Commander Most once more. Shortly we'll lay a wreath and observe a moment of silence for our fallen alumni at the Alumni Memorial. We reverently share the words, "No greater love has a man than to lay down his life for another." We acknowledge and honor so many, like our beloved alumnus Nick Silkowski, and one of my first students, Andrew Basevich, who laid down their lives in the war in Iraq in service to the ideals of freedom that we enjoy today. Today, we do not glorify conflict or war, but we remember and we thank those who've sacrificed so much for the countries and causes in which they believe. Today is a day to remember and to show gratitude to those who have served our country. Thank you, veterans, past and present, for what you've done for all of us. May this Veterans Day serve to bring us all closer together as a school community and as a nation. And may we never, ever take our veterans, their service, their commitment, and most of all, the freedoms that their service has guaranteed, let us never take them for granted. May God bless our veterans, and may God bless America. Thank you.
We'll be dismissed in just a minute. Before we do, I obviously have to give out some thank yous, some shout outs. Let's see, Mr. Pisarczyk and the band, once again, thank you for everything you've done. Mr. Penchik with his techno help, helping me with the videos again. Thank you. Mr. Willits, who's the man behind the curtain, helps me out a lot. Mr. Willits. And finally, Mr. Rickles, who every year sets up the gym and gets everything ready for us, ready to go. Thank you. In just a minute, we're going to go across the street, across the bridge in front of the Alumni House. As Mr. Post said, we always lay a wreath there and have a moment of silence